Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior warden for Fort Worth 148.
This is Gabriel Jagush, junior warden.
This is Evve Kuykendall, master of ceremonies for Fort Worth 148.
Oh, we're getting close, boys.
I know.
The holidays are coming up on us.
And I tell you what, I'm thankful.
Yep, I'm going to set up a hammock, and then I'm not going to do anything for about a month.
I'm telling you, I feel you. I can't wait. So, Evve, I'm looking at your name. You've got an R in there. You've got an R in there when you pronounce it. I'm hearing an R.
Yeah. There is, in fact, an R sound. Yeah, that's correct.
But there's no R in your name.
Well, I'm not an expert in German, so any of the brothers out there who are listening, don't come for me about this. But this is my explanation that in German there should probably be an umlaut over the U, and that makes it an R-controlled sound. Mm-hmm. So the Y ends up being silent, and the U ends up being the R sound. So
it actually gives it a little bit of a Q sound. So there's
but an Americanized R sound.
Yeah, actually, if there was
Americans and German don't speak very well.
Well, so if there was an umlaut over the U, it'd be then Kuykendall.
Kuykendall, actually.
Yeah.
It's like how the German word for oil is, and I actually have to make an effort to pronounce that word correctly instead of saying oil. But it's spelled umlaut O, L. 2 letters, umlaut O and L, and it's Öl, right? And so it's like the name that most Americans mispronounce as Goebbels, right? It's not how you say it. Right. It's spelled in Romanized English. It's G-O-E, BB whatever. The O-E means that originally it was one character, which was an O with an umlaut, and that's Goebbels, right?
Yeah, actually, you're right. It is Goebbels.
So a lot, however, that has become common parlance, right? So like, for example, Kuykendall has been normalized to become common parlance. So for us, that is the correct pronunciation because that is what we have adopted as it, right? So
I've been thinking Kuykendall. Kuykendall. I didn't even Kuykendall.
Yeah. No, when I was senior deacon, I kept introducing Evve as Evve Kuykendall.
Well, in my defense, whenever people mispronounce my name, I pretty much just roll with it because I figure with a name like that, you've got to have a pretty good sense of humor about it.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir.
Evve Kuykendall is an easy name to say. So,
Season 3, Episode 16, The Gang Bullies Evve for his name.
Shall we move on then?
Yeah.
It'll be the whole episode. Yeah.
This is all conveniently lampshading my own last name, by the way.
Exactly.
Right? We're just going to make fun of Evve's last name and then just throw a lampshade on mine. We're just going to ignore that. All right. Let's have discussion questions, Rhit.
Well, I think we wanted to kick this one off about subscribing and feedback for the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It's not something that we talk about a lot, but it is something that would help us as a podcast to, spread the word to other Masons out there that this is there because you see it all the time. What Masonic podcast do you listen to? So obviously we're not coming up in the search engine. So if you subscribe and leave feedback, it's going to help us out, get that word spread out. So any podcast app that you're using, whether it's Android or Apple, they'll have a way to subscribe and leave some feedback.
One of the benefits, too, is that you can usually set your podcast to automatically download the episode if you're on Wi-Fi. So that way you don't have to use data when you're out and about. If you don't have a great data plan, or even if you have a good data plan, it always helps to just download it on Wi-Fi at home.
Yep.
So yeah.
Cool. Yep. So go subscribe.
Yeah, and
Por favor.
And then rate us, please, because subscribing helps, but rating us brings us even more into.
Yes.
Subscriptions will bring us one level into visibility, but ratings and reviews is the bulk of it, actually, and that's actually the most important thing, is ratings and reviews. We'd prefer 5 stars, but obviously that's entirely up to y'all. And I'd love to read some of the reviews. That'd be kind of fun.
Yes, that's fun.
Yeah,
These guys are morons. They don't know what they're talking about. 5 stars.
What'd you say, Evve?
I was just saying that I kind of live off of reading. I mean, it's like Facebook on the comment section sometimes, and I really live for that sort of stuff, good, bad, and indifferent. I mean, if somebody has something to say, I think that we should, include a little segment at the beginning of every episode where we talk about feedback to our previous episodes and kind of incorporate a little bit more of the listener feedback, because, I mean, let's be honest, part of why we're doing this, the vast majority of why we're doing this, is to interact with a much larger group of Masons in Texas. And the only way we can do that is if this is a conversation between us and them. So I think that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. And I love that. I love that idea to where, we can even start pushing it out more and promoting that kind of thing, to leave us some feedback to chat about, because that's what's going to drive the content anyways. It gets tough coming up with it sometimes, so that'd be wonderful. Speaking of discussion questions, who wants to explain what a Masonic Passport is? I'm always surprised when it comes up, but it's like, I could see how that could be confusing. But who wants to explain what it actually is?
Since as I was telling you guys, I have a stack of them that I have yet to sell that was given to me to do so. I will be happy to explain to everyone what the purpose is. So if you're not aware, a Masonic Passport is a little book that looks like a passport. And when you open it up, it has your basic Masonic information in it. And then it has pages. So that way, when you visit another lodge, you can go up to the secretary and say, "Brother Secretary, would you mind stamping my Masonic Passport?" And he will pull out the lodge's stamp and stamp it on there and note details about your visit. And then you can look back at it and say, "Oh yeah, remember that time I visited, Phoenix Lodge in San Francisco? Here's, the information about that with the date and the stamp and all that." So that's really what it is. It's almost like a regular passport. It has no real validity. It's just a keepsake.
Yeah, just like you look through your passport, the real one, it shows what countries you went to and their little stamp. Same concept. And doesn't it have, or at least some of them I've seen, has a spot where the worshipful master and secretary sign. And I know you mentioned date, but you can look through, because there's a whole variety of them. Some have more information than others, different covers, but they're out there and they're cool if you're into visiting.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's just a great aid to memory, because how many times do you talk to somebody and you say, "How many lodges have you visited?" Or you ask them, "Hey, have you visited so-and-so lodge?" And their answer is, "Well, I honestly don't know."
Yep.
Because they
There's
think
no doubt
they may have visited that lodge. They have a pretty good feeling they did, but they can't actually recall it. Or they have a ballpark figure of how many lodges they've been to, but they don't really remember. Hey, it can help you organize yourself.
There's always that factor of, once you get locked into kind of collecting those stamps, you start seeking out lodges you hadn't been to, which is a great thing.
So Rhit, as a former secretary, I'm sure you've stamped your share of Masonic passports.
Yes. Quite a few, actually. I don't even know how many. I would say on average, probably 5 or 6 a year. So times 7, whatever that is.
Right. All right.
So not pretty often then.
Not as often as I think it should be, but again, they're not very commonly known. You know what I mean? And it, like I said at the beginning, it surprises me, but again, you can see how it's kind of confusing. What is it? Where do you even get it? Because you might see them at Grand Lodge in Texas on the table, but they're hard to find with all the other stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, if you're wondering where you get them, like I said, I have a stack of them. Send us an email.
And little dough, and you can have one in your hot little hands. Okay, so I had another one. Since that one's so quick and easy, what do you guys consider an active Mason?
Ooh, that's a hot button issue.
Yeah.
Is it
getting
though?
controversial, aren't we?
Okay.
Well, it shouldn't be, but I think that it ends up being, just because there are so many different people's ideas of what constitutes active in a lodge. Some people would just call an active Mason somebody who shows up and signs in on the logbook, but I think that there's a little bit more that goes into it than that.
So let me rephrase it then, because I can't see how snowflakies would take that as an attack on them, since they don't.
Rhit getting insensitive.
Yeah. So what standard do you have for yourself to consider yourself an active Mason? Like, what level would you have to fall below to where you're like, I'm just not active anymore?
So there's different levels, I think. So if you're an active Mason, for me, I would think that means you at least go to stated meeting. If you are a participating Mason, you also go to called meetings and you participate in degrees and take an actual part in them. So I think there's different levels there.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a huge distinction, active versus participating, because I would fully agree with, I would say, hey, active is you go to stated, and then participating means you go to at least one called meeting a month, and you actually participate in that thing, whether it's through committee work and not just, hey, I worked on the committee outside of this, right? Because that's behind the scenes. So you're active, and actually it's participating, but it's not necessarily active, right? Because it's not in the lodge. And some guys have to participate behind the scenes, and that's it, and that's great.
Actually,
yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. But to me, participating is something that is, generally speaking, built on top of active. And it would be, hey, at least once a month, I'm doing a ritual roll, or I'm delivering a talk, or I am guiding the lodge through this committee meeting, right? Like I'm the committee head of whatever,
So
like
active Mason would be essentially somebody who comes to stated meeting and votes and participates in that part. But a participant would be somebody who actually gets in a little greasy on their elbows. They're actually taking part in the nuts and bolts of what's going on.
Sure.
Well, yes, I would take it a step back. So on my answer previously, I said one who participates in the degrees, but you know what? Being there for the degrees is just as important, because I've conferred a degree with, a packed house. It's a fantastic feeling, right? It's a good experience for the candidate. It's a great experience for us who participate in it. And then I've also conferred a degree to where you have just barely enough to have all of the required parts, and it could still be a good degree, but it doesn't have the energy of a packed house.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same juice.
Well, I would say that we've done degrees that have less than the required number of parts.
Oh, we've doubled up on some. Yep, we've had to do that before.
That's definitely been a thing in the past.
So I love the way.
I think also. Go ahead, Rhit.
What? I was just going to say, I love the way you guys have dodged that question. That was so PC and beautiful.
No, we provided the answer to your question.
Bit deeper there.
Proceed, sir.
I think that an active Mason is in the, at least in the sense that we talk about them in lodges, is just somebody who pays dues, and they may not show up as a voter. They might not show up as for degrees. They might not show up anywhere. And I think that we really have to kind of retake the word active, because we're all sitting around here trying to parse what it means to be active, parsing language right now, because active Mason is just somebody who pays dues. That's really all it boils down to. It's just a little bit above demitting, and it's such a low bar to be an active Mason. And so we're trying to come up with words like participating Mason and
I love it. That's
a leading Mason, those sort of things. And we have to retake that word.
Well, and I think you've got a great point, because if you look back in the history and in the books, because we talk about the grandiose time when we had, 250,000 Masons in Texas and 2 million across the United States. You look in the sign-in book, only 10 to 15% are coming to the meetings still the same time. But those dues-paying members created these temples that we go to, these grandiose buildings. So there's something to be said. They need a title like they are an active Mason.
Contributing.
But I love the way. There you go. Maybe contributing's better.
Well,
but
and
in the
I would
legal
actually
sense of the word.
And so I think we do need to make sure that there is that distinction where if you are a dues-paying Mason, right, you are doing a service to your lodge by supporting it financially, but that doesn't mean that you're active, right? But we also need to make sure that we don't attach a stigma to being inactive, because you might not be participating, you might not be active and you may only be contributing, right, for any number of reasons, right? We've all known one guy who, he gets injured and, you don't see him for a long time, or he becomes a dad and things get really complicated, right? One of my best friends at work said that, he had a lot of kids really quickly when he was a Mason, and he had just gotten out of the East, and so he said, you know what, I'm going to really focus on my kids. And that was the correct decision for his family at that time, and he said, I paid my dues, and that was it. And that was the correct decision to make, right? But it does still have help to make some distinctions in terms of when you're talking about membership and trying to figure out who you might expect to see at the lodge.
Yeah, and for me, when it comes to active Mason, it's a much lower bar as well, a little bit higher than Evve's, because if you're paying your dues, you are technically considered an active Mason. But if you haven't set foot in lodge and you're listening to podcasts like this and you're reading books, to me, you're still an active Mason, because you're trying to learn and apply those principles in some form or fashion. And if you can't make it to lodge, you're still actively pursuing the art of Masonry, if you're doing things like that. So I would consider you an active Mason. And that's why I love the term participant, because if you're a participating Mason, you could be considered as a guy that works in degrees and stuff and things like that. But, because the dues paying members that don't ever don the doors, they have their role.
So I wanted to jump on top of that and add something that I was about to say, because I was actually about to talk about guys that are not active but still engage in Masonry in other venues. I would call them practicing Masonry.
There you go.
Practicing Masons, because they practice Freemasonry. They may be active in Freemasonry, but they practice it for sure. They use the lessons, they read, they practice it, they join charity organizations, do all these things that we expect active Masons to do anyway. Just because you're not active doesn't necessarily mean you're not a practicing Mason, right? So you have different aspects of it. Like you may be a participating Mason who isn't a practicing Mason, because you don't embed the tenets of the fraternity in your life, and you don't pursue self-improvement.
Good point.
Right? So you have to be both. You should at least strive to be active and practicing. You should, and if possible, shoot for participating and practicing. But the lowest bar you should go is contributing and practicing. But you should never drop to just contributing, right? You should always be practicing.
What a great little exercise for a lodge. sit around and talk about different terms and levels of, because that's interesting. Because you don't have to be a ritualist or you don't have to be a historian to be a Mason.
Right.
No,
that's an interesting take on it, because it's like you don't have to go to church necessarily to be a practicing Christian. You could still live the tenets in your daily life. You don't have to go to the synagogue to be a practicing, to be a practicing Jew. You can, as long as you live the faith and it's in your heart and you try to exhibit it every day, you are still a practicing member of that faith. Whether you actually check off the box of, oh, I went in, and so, I made the appearance and everyone saw me there. That's not what really matters. It's what's internal.
I think that it's important to note that none of us are trying to drag, those Masons that are just dues-paying, contributing members to their financial well-being of their lodge. I think that there, as Gabe said, there is a place for every Mason in every season of their life. And in some seasons of our lives, we're not going to be able to be as participating or as contributing to the lodge as perhaps we would like. But we can inculcate those values into our everyday lives. And I suppose that that's the most important thing to the personal growth and development of any Mason. I would love to see more Masons active in terms of coming to lodge, participating in the things that we do. I think that that's probably one of our big weaknesses as a fraternity, is not having enough people who are participating, so that when, like Billy said, when we have degrees, it really changes the dynamics and the way a new candidate feels about their initiatic experience when they have a large number of people to watch. And I think that we all agree that the energy is completely different. So, I would definitely encourage everyone out there to participate as much as they can and be as involved in the daily goings on of their lodge as possible. But we all recognize there's a season for everything.
Yeah. Let me add, you'll get out of it what you put into it.
I will fight you in the street with a knife.
You didn't have to go there, Rhit.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Oh,
Painful.
Let's move on to episode content.
I love you guys. Okay, so this is kind of a hodgepodge, right? We usually call these our Quarryman's Roundtables, right? And we have basically a number of subjects that we want to tackle, but none of them are, with stuff that we can construct a full episode out of. So every once in a while, we take some time out and we say, hey, guys, all this stuff that we wanted to discuss and talk about, let's all cram it into this one and roundtable them. So here we go. Let's talk about the first one. Rhit, introduce us.
Plans for Grand Lodge. So Grand Lodge session is right around the corner. It's the third weekend of January. So the first thing I've got is I'm just a Master Mason. So, as our Grand Lodge set up, past masters and the principal officers vote at Grand Lodge. So as a Master Mason, why would you want to go?
Because it's really fun.
Why would you not want to go?
That's probably a better way to phrase it, right? Because the thing that I think is the biggest, you're definitely going to be abreast of what's going on in your Grand Lodge and things like that. But you're going to learn how the proper from parliamentary procedure to how committee reports should be presented, the whole gambit. You're going to see it at Grand Lodge as close as you're going to see it, to perfection. And if you're not into that kind of thing, that you can sit there and watch that all day, there's so much other stuff to do. There's a museum, there's a library, there's a whole floor of swag being sold. So again, like Evve said, why wouldn't you want to go?
So personally, I think Grand Lodge is really cool because nothing beats actually being there and see all the lodges from across the entire state of Texas come together. And the networking is fantastic. And then there's vendors selling products on the bottom floor of stuff, you won't see anywhere else. It's really cool. But the main auditorium, the floor itself, it's great because at its slowest times, it's like watching C-SPAN, right?
Uh-huh.
At its best time, it's like watching a telenovela.
I mean, but really, it's
Dude,
fantastic.
There's been some wonderful drama, and there's nothing like here in the SoMo to be with 3,000 plus Masons in unison.
Oh, yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so
Besos
many
y
aspects. to cover.
lágrimas.
But there's a few brothers that get up to speak on certain resolutions every once in a while to where you just get on the edge of your seat and you're like, here we go, boys. This is going to be good.
Man, and I remember it too, because just last Grand Lodge, there was a contentious resolution, and we were looking at the line of guys. So for anyone that doesn't know how this works, the original proposer goes up, and if it's a really long resolution, they present an initial argument for it that summarizes it. If it's a short one, they may actually read it in full. It just kind of depends. And then they step back and they give opportunity for comment, and people will comment both for and against a proposed resolution, and there's a line that forms. Sometimes the line is just one dude standing there because he wants to be, he just wants to say, I disagree because this is dumb. Or he wants to say, hey, yo, there's nothing wrong with it and you should vote for this.
Yeah.
There's all sorts. But every once in a while, you will get a resolution where, oh gosh, I mean, you'll get like 15 guys in the line, and inevitably somebody sends a poor district deputy to go stand at the end of the line and tell people, nope, sorry, no, we're not adding it, which gets, so that happens. I don't remember if it happened at this Grand Lodge or not, but there was one where we had like 12 guys standing in line waiting to just open up the door of discussion rather violently, And we were sitting there like, oh, wait, it's going to happen. This poor guy's going to get torn apart.
And it's done in such a gentlemanly fashion that it's just, it's poetry in motion. It's so fun.
You and I have
to
different
watch.
definitions of gentlemanly, but okay.
Yeah.
It's
Sometimes
usually done.
It could get a little country every once in a while.
It wouldn't be Grand Lodge
Country
of Texas.
gentleman.
It wouldn't be Grand Lodge of Texas without a bit of little country debate. There was one Grand Lodge, I won't say what year, and I won't say who, but somebody was standing up to make an argument for something, and he ended his argument with a very forceful point, and basically trying to make brethren feel bad if they didn't vote one way or another on the thing. And in response to it, he got booed by the entire auditorium.
Yeah.
Oh,
which
the
was
Grand
something
West is,
I never thought I would ever see in my life. I was, wait a minute, you can boo in Grand Lodge?
dude, man, you can lose those guys so fast. It's a really unique experience. So you need to make plans.
Right, and make plans to stay after the vote, because a lot of people leave and there's still committee reports that have to be read out. And
Some
sometimes
super important ones.
Yeah, that have to be voted on. So if you're going to stay, don't just show up and see the vote for who becomes the next Grand Junior Warden. Stay afterwards, because there's still business to be done.
Yep. And of course, we get down there, or most of us get down there on Thursday night, and we have some fun that night too. But Friday night, there's a big shindig at the backyard that Waco 92 puts on, and it's so much fun. I think we do more masonry there, in that little 2-hour span than we do the whole weekend.
Yeah. Go for it.
I don't know about you guys, but the next morning, my throat always hurts and I'm losing my voice because there's so much conversation going on, but the music's going on at the same time. So you're sitting there yelling at each other, but it's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
I would say that pretty much every moment you're outside of actual Grand Lodge communication, right? The tiled environment. Like every moment that you're not by yourself outside of it is the very pinnacle of what I call parking lot masonry, right?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
that's in my opinion, that's the most important kind of masonry, right?
It's a lot of fun anyway.
Parking lot masonry is where all the important discussions happen and where all the best mentorship happens. And, you know, it may not physically occur in a parking lot at Grand Lodge, but, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And you'll find yourself in unusual situations, like playing Cards Against Humanity with someone that you're like, I would have never expected you to play this game.
Yeah. No, just having a blast. So, I mean, if you hadn't made plans, do it now. Third weekend in January, book a room. And if you don't have anybody from your lodge that wants to go, I know you can find a brother that will split a room with you, because it's an experience that you're going to enjoy.
And
there's so much going on.
And we'll all be there. So seek us out, and we may have something for you.
Yeah, we might. Let's see if we can not be lazy this year.
Right.
Man, we had so much fun though last year. So next topic I've got is about self-improvement. So does watching the ritual as a spectator, not working in it, does watching the ritual help in self-improvement for the seasoned Master Mason?
Yes.
There you go. I was waiting on somebody.
I didn't want to be the first one to get, I feel like I've been the first to talk a lot of times.
So why do you feel that way? How does watching the ritual make you better?
Well, I mean, for instance, personally, a couple of nights ago, our lodge just put together a fellow craft mason's degree, and listening to the lecture, I was sitting there just blown away, not only by the presentation, because Gabe did an amazing walking lecture for the fellow craft degree. So shout out to him. I was sitting there kind of in awe of the information and was just sitting over there. I've been through the fellow craft degree. I've put on a number of fellow craft degrees and been participant in them. But, listening to it, it really made me reflect on those lessons and why I really, really love the fellow craft degree so much. There's so much there, and there's no way that I think you could spend a lifetime studying the lessons of the fellow craft mason's degree and never really even scratch the surface. So absolutely, I was sitting there just blown away by the amount of information that I was thinking about, even though I've heard it dozens of times and talked about it with other brothers dozens of times and spent hours reading about it. I learned something new. And if you're even a halfway thoughtful person, I can't imagine not being able to sit in a degree and glean something from all of the lessons in every degree, whether it's the EA degree, the FC degree, and certainly the Master Mason's degree.
Okay. That sound good to y'all?
I mean, it's really hard to elaborate on that other than there is a moment of inspiration that can strike you at any time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've had this moment in all sorts of ways as relating to degrees where, I'll be in a degree being one of the conferring officers, and I'll have a realization of, oh, that's what this means, right? Like that's why we turn this way, or that's why I make this hand motion or whatever. Or it'll be in a degree practice and we're trying to, organize everybody and we're just running through the tactics of the degree and not really focusing on the words. And then you suddenly realize, oh, that's why you might gain a meaning of something, or you might go, oh, that's why we have to have this guy here, because physically it makes more sense during the ritual, right? Or whatever. You might be reading about the degree and suddenly understand something. Oh, that's this biblical reference. I get it now, right? There's a lot of, oh, I get it. But you have to be open to the possibility of learning something from a different experience, and you also have to be in that different experience. So if you're used to conferring degrees or participating in degrees, try and take the time to be a sideliner and just watch the degree. And that's one of the best things you can do, because if you're hardwired where, like, oh yes, I do, junior warden in this degree and senior warden in that degree, and I'm the captain of the host in this degree, and I'm the prelate for whatever, it doesn't matter. But you have these roles that you know how to take, and you've mastered them and whatever. And then when you jump out of those roles and you give yourself the opportunity to view it from a completely different angle, which in some case your completely different angle may have to be observing it as a spectator if you can do every part in the degree, right? And that's when you start to open yourself up to, oh, I get it.
Yeah, those aha moments can happen a lot. It's fertile ground for them.
I think it's helpful to watch it being conferred and put on by other people too, because sometimes you'll hear yourself, right? You find your own cadence and style and words in points that you emphasize, or hand gestures that you do. Sometimes watching someone else do their interpretation of it, their cadence, their motions and so forth, it emphasizes parts that you didn't really focus on before, but it calls it to your attention and you pull something out of it. I've had that several times where I watch something and I'm like, you know what? I'm so focused on this part, I didn't even really consider the ramifications of what's done here. I didn't think of putting the emphasis on this aspect of it. And it's like you see it in a whole new light.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like Gabe said, looking at it from another angle. It's like the old tale about the elephant. Everybody's feeling on a different part.
Right.
So you get a full view, from that spectator seat. So
I also think that there's a certain degree of you have these moments whenever you might be participating in the degree, or I think especially as a sideliner, where you suddenly realize that this is changing someone's life, specifically the participant.
Yep.
Because you have that awe and that reverence, and you see the look on their face when you drop the truth bomb on them, or you drop that knowledge bomb on them, and suddenly they get that look. And we had an EA that we initiated not long ago, who I felt like, when the moment happens that we all kind of know about in the EA degree, or we all kind of the culmination of it, the look on their face is just inspiring, because that you just did something that changed their life and the way that they are going to look at the rest of their life forever.
Yeah,
and that's an awesome experience.
Sometimes it's hard not to be a little jealous and say, man, I wish I could do that all over again.
That's the truth. But I was going to say, Evve, I think you gave us our new hashtag. I'll beat David Gill to this. Hashtag knowledge bomb.
I love knowledge bomb. Okay.
Hashtag knowledge bomb. So if the ritual does, if just being a spectator alone, I mean, that kind of being a participant obviously means it's going to be even personified a little bit more in a sense. But if being a spectator alone helps in self-improvement, is that enough? Is that like all we need as Masons is to either participate or watch degrees to self-improve?
Yeah. Now that I think is where we get into the deep end of the swimming pool, as Gabe and I were talking about in a recent discussion.
This was actually a really great discussion.
Yeah, talk about parking lot masonry, literally.
I
really think that it's right. I think that it is. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, with one of the participants, he called me. That's what inspired this.
Who?
B-Dubs.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha.
Oh, he ratted on us. Okay.
Listen to him.
Yeah.
Here we thought we were all being discreet in our parking lot masonry.
No, he's political.
No, I think. So, I think that whenever we're really talking about like top level, surface level, veneer masonry. I think when we're talking about the ritual, being a participant, being a spectator, I don't think personally, this is just my personal perspective. Don't come for me about it.
Don't at me.
The ritual. Yeah, don't. It's just my opinion, and you might disagree with me, but I really think that rituals are kind of like that top level, that really surface level, not really too deeply scratching the surface when you're just watching and participating in a degree. That is not so much personal improvement. While it's what you bring to it that makes it self-improving, and just sitting there, just participating in it, just giving your lines isn't changing you as a person. I think it takes a lot more than just going to a degree or watching a degree to affect the person and the Mason.
I agree with that, because you can apply that to anything, right? I mean, if I read about meditation and I can tell someone how to meditate, but unless I do it myself, I don't see any benefit from it. You can even extend that to, if I read about how to hit baseballs better and I could teach someone how to do batting, but unless I go to the batting cage, I'm not going to improve myself. Yeah.
Kind of goes back to that active and practicing Mason kind of thing. Just because you watch the degrees or even work in them doesn't mean you're a practicing Mason, like Gabe said. So what can a lodge do to facilitate those kind of things? To inspire guys to get on that journey.
Take the degree seriously.
Well, personally, absolutely. I agree with Billy 100% with that. Make it serious and don't half ASS it. It is absolutely necessary to take the role that you were given seriously.
Yeah, and let's just say that is the case, because outside of the ritual, because we do establish that well done ritual does help in self-improvement. So what could a lodge do outside of the ritual work to help in that self-improvement?
Well, going back to our conversation in the parking lot, I really think that setting up opportunities for organic brotherhood to happen is key. I don't think that brotherhood really happens in a degree. Think about what happens. We were conferring the the fellowcraft degree a couple of nights ago, and the such an important part of the brotherhood that happened was while we were setting up, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze while we were getting things ready, while our candidate was getting prepared and all of that stuff. So that was the organic off growth of a formalized event. So it's not so much the formalized event, in my opinion, that does it. It's the stuff that surrounds it, the stuff that preludes it, and the stuff that happens afterwards. And it's the lodge's role to set up those opportunities for that organic brotherhood and that organic growth to happen.
So give me an example of something of that situation to create that organic.
Well, I think one of the examples that I've used most recently is we have our new candidate night. Every Monday night, our new potential candidates come up to the lodge and they sit around a table, and a master mason usually leads them in some sort of discussion, kind of as a bumper car kind of experience, where they just kind of meander through some of the things that they need to be prepared for as they're getting ready for their journey in Masonry, and preparing to be part of our lodge. And as we're determining whether or not they are suitable material to be a member of our lodge. But afterwards, there are so many times whenever it happens in the parking lot, or it happens, they go out and those guys, involve themselves in, some after event fellowship. And that's the organic off growth that I'm talking about. That it's not so much the sitting around the table that made it grow. While that absolutely helps, it sets the stage for the after conversations, the stuff that happens organically between people that you can't predict, you can't script, you can't write a curriculum for it, you can't write a degree for it. It just happens between 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 brothers. All of a sudden, it becomes a moment that you remember and that changes you. And that's what we need to be in the job of creating more often.
No, I've referred to that often as campfire masonry, because there was a time that I had a bunch of brothers in lodge that we would always get around some kind of cauldron or something and make a fire, roast some kibosses or whatever. And man, we had some great times, and was practicing masonry right in somebody's backyard. And it was very memorable, and some good things came out.
And I think that it's the lodge's role to create an environment where those things can happen, by setting up the Master Mason night where everybody gets together and talks, and then afterwards something organic happens, or doing the degree, having some time kind of really segregated for just post-degree chat between the degree team or the degree team and the participant that isn't part of the degree. And something magical will happen. Just give it the opportunity, but lodges have to get that opportunity. And I think that that's the challenge as I see it. What do you think about that, Gabe? Because I know that you had some thoughts about it as well.
Yeah. Because I think that unstructured environment after the degree or after stated or whatever is I've already mentioned that that's the parking lot masonry, right? Where the best mentorship happens, where the best conversations happen. It's very valuable to factor that, hey, when you tell people, hey, I'm going to be home at around so-and-so time, make sure you factor that into it, right? The way that I look at Freemasonry is that the most value that you're going to get out of it is by living your friendships that you have made with other Masons, right? Everything, and I know that not everybody might agree with this, but everything that Freemasonry provides, other organizations can provide, right? Your church can provide it, service organizations can provide it, esoteric mystery schools can provide it, college fraternities can, whatever. It's just so happens to be that Freemasonry provides many of those things, if not all of them, all at once and in a very convenient package. But the reality is it's there to get a bunch of like-minded guys together where you can explore those things. So the best opportunity you have to get a benefit out of it is living those friendships, right? Which one of the best ways is parking in the parking lot,
Yeah, I think a great example is the podcast we did out at Ricky's house with DP. I mean, that was a moment I will not soon forget. Yeah,
absolutely. We're helping a brother move out of his house, right? And if it's just brothers there, right? Man, y'all are going to have some really good conversations.
Yep.
Start, because that's kind of the jumping off point is, in the parking lot, and then it moves on to I'm hanging out with this person outside of lodge, and this, even if I wasn't a Mason, this guy would be my friend. I just happened to meet him through Masonry, that kind of thing, and that's kind of where the meat of it is.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I wanted to double back to being a spectator. So would you guys all agree that watching a degree that the team is struggling with can be painful to watch.
I hate to say it, but yeah, it's super painful to sit and watch a degree that's going badly.
I don't think you'd be human if you didn't. I mean, in the end, we're not thinking, oh my God, these guys are horrible. It's just like, oh Lord, they're struggling. Oh my gosh. And I get like sweaty palms. I get, hot. And it's like, oh man, oh geez, I wish this was going better. It's a weird feeling. It's not like I'm being judgy about it. It's just like I'm empathizing in such an extreme manner that it creates like a physical change in my body to where it gets hot all of a sudden.
What are you, Spider-Man?
Well, and maybe I experience it to the extreme, but it's not fun to watch.
You're not the only one. I'm just making
my
fun
Rhit
of you.
sense is going off.
Yeah. No, I'm just teasing you because I feel very similarly. Mostly, if you're a ritualist, right? Ritualist has implications. If you participate in ritual, everybody's been there where you're in the middle of a paragraph or you're even just in the middle of a sentence and all of a sudden the floor of your brain drops out and everything's on the ground and you go, I don't even remember my own name.
It's like, where am I?
So, you just have that moment. And so I do empathize mostly, I empathize with the guys that are conferring. Mostly, though, the negative experience, the negative emotions that I associate with a bad conferral are feeling bad or awkward by proxy for the candidate.
Yeah.
For the candidate, because
yeah, that's a good point.
We talk about, like every candidate's degree is perfect because no candidate realizes what the mistakes are, right? But I've
seen degrees where they know.
Yeah, I was going to say I have actually seen a candidate correct someone.
I was going to say, yeah. I was going to say what you just said, Billy. I went to a degree once, and God help these guys. They were really trying, and they did, most part, a very, very good job. But there was one dude who he just did not necessarily seem prepared. And the candidate, when he interacted with everybody else, it was fine. But you could see that his body language changed when he was being addressed by this other guy.
Yeah.
Because it was just kind of drawn out and painful to watch.
Well, and that's kind of the point I wanted to make because, I mean, it's the same thing as watching a bad movie. I'm never going to watch that again. But if you see something you really like The Godfather, you can't watch it enough. Or Goodfellas, Gabe. You can't watch the movie enough. And it's the same thing with the ritual to where we all want more people there. And I think one of the biggest keys to making that happen is to work on that ritual and put the effort into it. You're never going to be perfect. Maybe once, but everybody goofs up.
The best way that I can explain it is, when you were little and you went over to your friend's house to sleep over or something like that, and then your friend's parents yelled at them, and you just sat there trying to be invisible while your friend's parents chewed them out for some sort of analogy. Thing. That's how I feel during a bad degree where I'm just a spectator, where like I am the little kid sitting at his parents' house, being brutally awkward and trying to be invisible.
So I think there is a key distinction, though. I mean, because if you've done ritual enough, you can watch when someone does it, and maybe they're nervous. And you know what? That's all right. It's okay to be nervous. We're all nervous until we get comfortable with it. And that only comes from doing it over and over again. Or maybe they had one of those moments when like Gabe said, the bottom of your brain drops out and you can't remember the next word. I've been up there before myself where it's like in the middle of the obligation, you're going and you're like, I got this. And then you hit that spot and you're like, oh crap. And you got to go through it in your mind until you pick up where you were before. That happens. And you know what? That's okay too. I think what's not okay is if you volunteer to do a part and then you make no effort to learn it, and I've seen this happen, you can tell when it happens. That it's like he didn't practice.
No, that's when those feelings happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of the biggest thing where like I'm not talking. At least my understanding of this conversation has not been people who make mistakes in ritual, or who maybe you got something wrong in it when you're conferring it. Like my understanding of this is like when you're looking at a train wreck, right?
Right.
That's where it's. Oh, and then you'll get the guys that always say, "You got a really good degree."
Right.
Please don't tell him that.
Yeah.
Because he knows it. And, because when you get one of the ones where hell, I saw an entered apprentice degree where the guy knew that wasn't the way it was supposed to go. Not because he had read up on it, but just because there was no way that it made sense, right?
Yeah.
And somebody told him, "You got a really good degree after that." There was a little bit like of a flash of emotion that crossed his face, and it was just like, no, because it's kind of insulting, right?
Yeah.
If somebody tells you, "Oh, yeah, you got a great degree," after something that was not a great degree,
right? That's almost
like
you're setting a standard that you don't want to set.
Right.
Say something different.
Well,
congratulations.
That's almost like, hey, I'm glad you survived that plane wreck. Only 4 people died. You got a really good flight.
You got a really good flight. So, but as a counterpoint, though, one of the best degree experiences I've ever had was during one of the worst conferrals, right, I've ever experienced. I was a candidate along with another member of this podcast, and we were told beforehand, guys, this is going to be a show. And they warned us.
I'm going to preface it right now.
And they warned us about it. And it was. And it was not very good. But we enjoyed the hell out of it and had a great time. And there was a lot of laughing, even though we weren't supposed to be laughing. Right? And then, we finished the degrees and we all agreed, wow, that was terrible and so much fun. And we've had a great time with those degrees. And we've been, now, we're part of, all the guys that got initiated are part of the degree team. We're working towards it and improving it, right? But we were all very upfront about, hey, this is not going to be a great experience, but you're going to be okay. And it was just the honesty of it that made it worth it.
Yeah. So before we get too short on time, I want to cover this last topic real quick about it. I'm mainly focused on the Grand Lodge building because it's something we all have in common. But there's a lot of lodges, from small to bigger lodges, that have buildings that they're struggling to pay for. Mm-hmm. So the little intro I put in here is that in the 1940s, when the Grand Lodge building was being planned and built, there was just over 100,000 Masons, and they had just had a drop and were starting to build back up again from the Depression and whatnot. And those men put together the funds to have the building built, which was, that's a huge amount of money to have it built. So fast forward to 2019, and we've got somewhere around 70,000 Masons. And it's not like this problem just happened 2019. But if we have the money to maintain it, we barely do. So where did we miss the fork in the road? If 100,000 Masons could raise the money to build that, which is probably 6 to 7 times more than the money it takes to maintain it, if not more, why can't 70,000 Masons pay to maintain it? What went wrong in the past?
Well, I would probably posit that it has something to do with people kicking the can down the road and going for the cheapest option when it comes to maintenance issues. I know that I've seen that very often where budget is considered the priority in most lodges. And when it comes to building repairs, you go with the lowest bidder because it's the cheapest, and that's going to be the least impact to the lodge. And then all of a sudden, that you got what you paid for. And so now you kick down the can down the road, and you kick the can down the road, and suddenly what would have cost, X now costs Y to repair. And so it's about, and I'm not trying to throw our predecessors under the bus, but I kind of am going to end up throwing them under the bus. It's poor stewardship and brothers not holding people accountable and saying it, the argument that I make is it's a doctor heal thyself situation. It's great that we have scholarship funds. It's great that we have all these charities that we do, but what's the point of doing it if we can't afford our lodges? So we have to maintain our own lodges. We have to maintain our facilities before we can go out in the community and do the things that we want to do. We have to make sure that we are a stable, sustainable, and an organization that is paying its bills and taking care of itself, so that we can do what we are really here to do, which is make good men better. Charity is great, but if your lodge is falling apart and it hasn't been cleaned in 6 years and you're having a membership problem, maybe you need to start thinking about doing what you need to do in your lodge to maintain it, rather than trying to be an outward facing organization when what's inside is failing.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the point that inspired this whole thing, because I was down at Grand Lodge the other day, and the landscaping was not up to par. There were clearly bushes, that needed to be trimmed away from the building and things. And it wasn't like you went up there and were like, oh God, it's horrible. But it's just little things. But it is kind of emblematic of a lot of lodges across the state. And it kind of inspired the thought of what was it like in the, that span from the 30s to the 60s when all these lodges were being built and looked brand spanking new. What kind of impression did that have on the immediate community? I mean, it had to be good. Who wouldn't want a beautiful building built in their neighborhood,
Right.
And somehow, somewhere along the way, it's like we put them on the back burner. Like they would just always be there.
And more importantly, I mean, who would want a beautiful building back in the the 20s, 30s, and 40s? But also, who wouldn't want to go to a lodge that is this grand edifice of architecture, as opposed to a corrugated tin building on a parcel that is outside the city limits in a giant field surrounded by like swamp?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what's happening, is that whenever we are selling these buildings, and and if it happens at Grand Lodge, well, what's the alternative? I mean, if our Grand Lodge building goes away because we haven't been good stewards of it, because of maintenance, or because we can't afford it anymore, what's going to happen?
So
are we going to have the membership that we really need and is going to draw people in? I mean, that's an important question to me.
No.
So what happens is, if we lose our Grand Lodge building, we rent out offices somewhere else, and we don't control it. And more than likely, those offices would only be used for conducting actual business. It wouldn't be used for conferring rituals or anything like that. So you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have the history, and we would be meeting in cheap hotels every year for annual communication. And actually, maybe that's not fair, right? I mean, we'll be meeting in hotels, and
Yeah.
it depends on whether, what the state of the lodge finance or Grand Lodge finances are, as whether, they're cheap or nice hotels or whatever. But when I visit other states who don't have a annual communication, or don't have their Grand Lodge, Grand Chapter, Grand Commandery, whatever meetings, when they do it in a hotel, they always say it's really great that you guys have a Grand Lodge building. you know,
Yeah.
it's nice to have a home.
I've talked to many Masons in other jurisdictions that do the hotel thing.
Yeah.
None of them like it. You know, they're like, it doesn't feel Masonic, especially if they're coming and visiting our Grand Lodge.
Right.
It is home. And, you know, I've never been on the side of selling that, although it seems to pop up all the time about selling it. But it couldn't be, you know, like you guys said, our home and everything. But, you know, Robert Marshall, he gave me a great point when I chatted with him a few months ago about how if you had Grand Lodge in Houston, the chances of having a Houston Grand Master would be tripled because it's right there in their backyard. So all those past masters from that area are going to show up and vote the way they want, to where Waco has a small number of lodges. So it's not like they can go in and, you know, it's not like Houston that has 60 lodges.
Right.
It's a central area to where it keeps things as neutral as possible. And again, it's a beautiful home.
But that is true, because the one grand body we do have that does meet in, you know, different hotels around the state is Grand Commandery. And there is a huge advantage that if you are from the Houston area and you're running for the Grand Commandery line and it's held in Houston, well, guess what? You know, you picked up a whole bunch of additional votes. And so there's a lot of strategizing of, oh, when's the Grand Commandery going to be held in my area? That's the year I'm going to run.
Yeah. Same thing with, you know, the North Texas, you know, if you're in DFW and you want to run for Grand Commandery, you got to do it when it's in DFW. If you're in West Texas, pick a West Texas city, that kind of thing. I mean, all the major areas. That's going to be not the factor, but it's going to be a factor for sure, right?
Right.
And it's something that you can't ignore. So Waco,
you can overcome it, but you have to work harder.
Yeah. So Waco is a cool neutral ground. So I don't know.
No, I
frankly, nothing makes me more sad though. Whenever because you know, I love going and seeing buildings and looking up and seeing, you know, the Masonic symbol, you know, the square and compasses on a building. It's great, but nothing makes me more sad whenever I see that building is no longer a temple or a lodge, because how much history did we lose because some lodge wasn't good stewards of their building or of their finances. And there's nothing sadder than when I see like you know, some other, you know, like Hyatt Regency on a Masonic temple, or, you know, Holiday Inn, or, you know, XYZ County Conference Center. Those
cleaners. It
grates on my nerves so much, because that's history. That is us being sold to some corporation and sanitized, and the only thing that remains is a square and compasses on the outside of the building that was etched into the building, you know, in the 1940s. And
if that,
we've lost something. We've lost a piece of ourselves when that happens. And if we allow that to happen to our grand buildings in Waco, we've talked about the political ramifications, but what happens whenever that now gets turned into the Waco Conference Center, or the the Baylor University, you know, extension office for student alumni affairs, or whatever it gets turned into? What have we lost because of it?
Yeah, it'd be painful to drive by.
Yeah, and it's just that sort of thing destroys me, and I see it happening at the Grand Lodge level, and I see it happen at lodge levels, and it just really, it's painful. I was a member of a lodge that had to sell their building whenever I first become part of Masonry. You know, the lodge began falling into disrepair. The money wasn't coming in. Some hard decisions had to be made. Some tough, contentious votes had to be taken. And at the end of the day, a beautiful building is going to be is being sold, and it's going to be replaced with a nondescript, you know, community center style building out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And that hurts.
sometimes those choices too are made without really thinking through the ramifications or looking at the actual cost that would go into selling the building and moving in somewhere else, because you're going to have to go somewhere. And we kind of deal with this a little bit with our own temple association and some of the choices that we're advocating, in raising the temple assessments, is that, for the price that we're paying per member, there's nowhere else that you could possibly meet at that would be cheaper. But we don't feel like paying the money it takes to actually repair the building, and restore it to its former glory. But when you look at it, you're going to pay a lot more money if you take that option, right? You may get unless you are sitting on some prime real estate that is going to bring up a whole bunch of money. Usually it's not worth it in the long run to actually sell your building.
Yeah, the conversation becomes, hey, we can't afford, if you sell your building and then start renting a place or try to buy a place, but usually you'll have to rent until you can buy a place. The discussion becomes, hey, guys, we can't afford to run this building. And it becomes, hey, guys, we can't afford to run this organization at all. Yeah. Right?
That's the next step, usually.
It takes you from losing a building to losing your body.
No, it is.
And that's the... Oh, go ahead, Rhit. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a tough situation.
And I think to Gabe's point it is speaking so deeply about what has happened to with our finances that we are spending so much money, doing great in the community, and that is admirable. But whenever what we are all about, making good men better, takes a back seat to charity and to community outreach, that it really begs the question, like, what's the point? What's the point of Freemasonry if we're losing focus like that?
No, and I think there is a place for both of them for sure, because our house should be taken care of by us. And that's a simple fact that if you don't have enough money coming in, figure out how to make it happen. And you can at the same time be doing charitable activities. That's great. That's the backbone of a lot of lodges, but you're not doing that to pay for your building. I know some are bridging the gap and doing that. It's fine, but you got to work your way out of it. We should be taking care of our own house. Because in the end, like Billy said, even when it comes to Grand Lodge, it's probably still going to be cheaper to be at that temple. If we sold it, we'd have a big influx of cash, but then we have to rent offices. We have to rent storage for the monumental amount of historical artifacts that would go in a freaking storage bin. And then we have to rent hotels every year. So I don't know that it would be cheaper, so.
Yeah.
And then even if you do get the windfall of selling an expensive prime real estate building, let's say like the Grand Lodge in Waco, how long is it going to take before mismanagement of that money, even if it's put into an endowment and into, secure, trusted, money-making investments, how long is it going to be until that money disappears?
Yep.
If you're mismanaging your funds to begin with, then you're going to mismanage them, and you're just kicking the can down the road. And I keep coming back to it, and I've said it, and I'm going to beat the dead horse. Doctor, heal thyself. If your lodge is in the red, then get it out of the red. And if that means that you have to suck it up, Buttercup, and do a fundraiser, then go have a pancake breakfast. Go sell something. Make it worth. Make it happen, because when you lose it, it's gone forever.
No, and I just visited a lodge that was on their deathbed, and they did fundraisers for charity and to help with their lodge funds, and they were clear about it. They did it all legal, but they're getting so many members now from getting out in the community to where they're on the verge of not having to do fundraisers to take care of their own house.
Right.
Well, make it happen.
And there are other options too. A lot of things that we have that the lodge pays for doesn't necessarily have to come out of the lodge budget, right? I mean, it's okay to pass the hat and let everyone contribute what they feel like or what they can afford without necessarily putting it on the lodge budget. And when you look at your budget, there's going to be a couple of things that if you're having problems with your outgoing cash being way more than your incoming cash, those are choices you're going to have to make and say, hey, we used to give away $500 to this charity. Well, this year, we need to save that money. So let's take it off of the budget. Let's still pass the hat, or let's have some kind of, other, like a raffle or something like that, even though you have to be careful how you have raffles everywhere.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
I mean, you can have something
charity.
like that. So that way it's like, it's not coming out of the lodge budget, but we're still providing in the best way we can while being fiscally responsible.
Exactly. There's ways. You got to get creative. Maybe that'll be a whole nother podcast. My whole point is if you're on the train of selling that Grand Lodge building, you should definitely rethink that. Circle back. So I've got a dual quote of the week. Which, do you guys know if Winston Churchill was a Mason? He wasn't, was he?
Yeah, he was.
Was he?
Yep.
Yeah.
Brother Winston.
Okay. So it is kind of a fraternal quote. Okay, so Brother Winston Churchill said, "The price of greatness is responsibility." And then I found an anonymous quote that I really liked and had to include it. So responsibility is accepting that you are the cause and the solution of the matter. I think it's so fitting.
It's kind of like you're your own best friend and your worst enemy.
Yeah. And I've always kind of had the philosophy that if I have a problem in my life, it's my own fault. Even if it's clearly somebody else being a knucklehead, it's a problem I've got to deal with, so how do we figure out, how do we get to the solution?
Right.
And I think once we all get to that mentality, we're going to figure out ways to make it happen.
Hashtag truth bomb.
We've got too much history to preserve.
Yeah. In regards to that quote, I can just think of the Michael Jackson song "Man in the Mirror."
Yes.
Working on the man in the mirror. Like
Shamon.
Shamona. But yeah, I don't know. Like, there's a lot to be said about, hey, sometimes you really have to cut the crap and sit down and look at yourself as a person and as an organization very critically, and that is not fun. And
Nope.
But that's what Masonry is about, I think. So.
No, that's how you build a legacy. Because if you turn the ship and you preserve that piece of history, there's going to be a great grandson of somebody that's going to be appreciative of it. Even if they don't know your name, they're going to be thankful to be meeting in that edifice. So, get with it. All right. Gabe, you want to shoot out contact info and then we'll sign this bad boy off?
Sure thing. So our contact info is www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is fortworthlodge148@gmail.com. And make sure to mark your calendars for Saturday, July 25th, 2020 for Texas Masonicon 3 or Texas Masonicon 2020. I got to wear shades. My future's so bright.
All righty, gentlemen. This has been fun. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabriel Jagush signing off.
This is Evve Kuykendall signing off.
Woo! All righty, guys.
Just a little over budget. Sorry, Billy.
Sorry, Billy.
No, that's our